Hi everyone, I'm Mary from Joyful and Mary Quilting, and I would like to welcome you to my tutorial on our quick and easy pillowcase pattern. This pattern is perfect for any occasion, whether you're using floral prints, kids fabrics, maybe designs for Christmas or Easter or spring or Thanksgiving. It really makes a quick and easy gift. Today I'm going to be demonstrating the pattern with these beautiful fabrics from the Sweetheart collection by My Mind's Eye for Riley Blake Designs. And it's going to be just in time for Valentine's Day. Now be sure to download the free PDF pattern from our website at joyfulandmaryquilting.com/pillow and follow along with me as we create this special pillowcase together. So let's get started. So let's make a quick and easy pillowcase pattern with French seams, and I'm going to show you how to do that. This is the pillowcase that I showed you in the introduction that was on the pillow, and I used those fabrics from Riley Blake Designs Sweetheart collection by My Mind's Eye. And I just love them. There's so many in the collection. I don't have all of them here. But if you look, these are the fabrics that I used in this particular pillowcase. This one, and this one. And then in the one that we're going to make today, I'm going to use these three. These are the three fabrics that I'm going to be using. They're still from the same collection. And you will need 27 inches by width of fabric of whatever you're going to use for your main pillowcase fabric. So that's the big part. Then you have your accent strip. You just need one 2-inch strip, and then your cuff fabric, you need a 12-inch by width of fabric strip. So these are the three fabrics to make one pillowcase. We'll call this our main fabric. We'll call this our cuff fabric. We'll call this our accent strip. So the first thing that we need to do is before you cut anything, you'll want to spray them with a pressing solution and press all the wrinkles out, just so that it's easier to work with. Once you've done that, we are going to fold these two pieces in half and press them. This one's a little bit tighter because it's a small strip, but what you're going to do is you're just going to fold it in half and press it all the way down the strip. So you're going to do that with this one. You're going to do that with your cuff fabric as well. You're going to fold it in half and you're going to press it all the way down the strip. So go ahead and do that. We have pressed our fabric pieces, our accent piece in half, our cuff fabric in half. Right sides are on the outside. We are going to add these pieces to our main pillowcase fabric. So we're going to start with the accent fabric. We're going to set this one aside for a second. And you just want to match the middle. Now keep in mind, this is selvage to selvage. This is our cut edge, so our horizontal width is probably 42, 44 inches, whatever your width of fabric is. Our vertical measurement is that 27 inches. Remember, we cut our piece 27 inches, so it's 27 from top to bottom. We're going to take this piece and we are going to pin it from the middle out. You can use clips, but I find that the clips, with all the pinning that we're doing, or all the clipping that we would be doing, it's a little difficult to keep everything from coming apart. So I like the pins better. If you're really handy with the clips, go ahead and use the clips. For the first pinning, we just need a couple of pins in here, not a lot. We just want to stabilize it. We're going to repin once we add our cuff fabric and then once we roll our pillowcase up. So we're going to go ahead and we've pinned that edge. Now let's pin this one. And you just want to make sure that those raw edges are next to each other. They're as if they were one, because we're going to be sewing and we don't want anything to not be caught in the seam. So this is our first pinning. Now we're going to pin our cuff fabric. And if you take a look at the pattern on figure 5, this needs to be right sides together with our pillowcase fabric. So we're going to open it up, match those midpoints. And even though I've pressed, you can see my manufacturer's fold still kind of shows here, which is fine because this is going to end up being the place where we fold our pillowcase in half. So it's kind of, we can line everything up with that if it's still visible. If it's not, then you just have to eyeball it. Just replace those pins. I don't know where that one snuck in for Valentine's Day, I guess. So we've got this side repinned. Let's go ahead and repin this side. Okay, now we have everything pinned again, and we are going to roll up the main pillowcase fabric. So we're going to move this up. We're going to start at the bottom. We want to make sure that this is out of the way, so we're just going to flip that up. Flip this piece up out of the way. Everything is pinned securely. This is where the clips, it's a little bit of an issue because they can come loose. Then we're going to roll this up, and it needs to be a rather tight roll, but not, not super tight. And it's just easily rolled all the way up. We're going to just keep rolling it until we get to our cuff. Okay, now the next part is a little tricky, but what we are going to be doing is putting this piece over the roll and pinning it to this. So the easiest way to do that, first of all, is we're going to spin it. Just spin it this way. Then we're going to throw this over the top, and we're going to flip it this way. Did you get that? Okay. If not, go back and replay it, spin it, flip it, and then we are ready to pin. So this raw edge is going to be pinned to this one. What we're basically doing here is we want to get our pillowcase fabric, that roll, inside the cuff fabric. Some people call it the burrito method. So that's what we're doing. We want this inside. So we're going to fold this up, and then once again we're going to repin. And we want all those raw edges as best as we can to match. Now we are going to be sewing a 1/2 inch seam, which is helpful. Just in case something isn't quite lined up, it will be caught in that seam because a 1/2 inch is a pretty good size seam. So we're going to do that. You don't have to worry about doing any kind of a zigzag or anything like that because it will all work out in the end. We're just going to do a straight stitch a 1/2 inch in, and the instructions show you that. So once it's all repinned, if you feel like you need to use more pins to secure it, go ahead. Now we are going to sew a 1/2 inch seam. We're going to start here at this edge. And remember, we've got all these, they don't line up exactly right. So start at the edge and just keep going. You want to catch all of these pieces in that seam. You're just going to sew all the way down and to this end. So go ahead and do that, 1/2 inch seam. So I have sewn my seam all the way down, and now what we need to do is we need to get that main pillowcase fabric out of the tube. And the only way to do that is to pull. And this looks like it's not going to work, but it does. So you just keep pulling until you get it all the way out. And you want to just move the cuff fabric down, and just keep pulling. And like I say, it will eventually come out. And this was why we didn't need to do anything special with those seams, because they're all hidden. So here we go. And everything looks great. We've got our accent strip, we've got our cuff fabric, and we have our main fabric. So we are almost finished with our pillowcase. This was the tough part. What you want to do now is you want to iron right along this edge. Now if you want, you can do a little top stitch. I don't usually do that, but you can. You can do a top stitch or even a decorative stitch all along this edge if you want. Either way, this all needs to be pressed flat. So let's go ahead and do that pressing. You can spray it with pressing solution if you want, just to give yourself, or use a pressing marker to give yourself a nice flat seam there. You may want to use a pressing marker along the edge here. I think that really helps to make everything lay nice and flat. That's one option. You just press it until it's dry. I'm very careful not to spray pressing solution on my wool mat. If you have one, this is my Novadon merino wool pressing mat, which I love because it's the length of my ironing board. But we want to protect the wool from any kind of a solution. You can wash it, but it's better, you can put a piece of flannel on the pressing mat before you actually go ahead and do your spraying, or you can just use your pressing marker and concentrate that pressing right where it needs to go. You can even do it on this fold here as well. Then you don't worry about that happening. The other option, if you don't want to use a pressing solution, is you can spray with water and then use your clapper and go along, and that will also flatten your seams nicely, especially on this pressing mat. The pressing mat, the wool pressing mat, is just really good about absorbing that heat, putting it back into the fold, and then you've got some nice crisp edges here just using water. Whatever works for you. If you're not familiar with the pressing marker, I do have a video about it and we will link it in the description. This is really a lifesaver when it comes to creating those flat seams, concentrating your solution, your pressing solution, where it needs to go without having it go everywhere. And look at, you just get a nice flat seam out of it. Now that we have this pressed, it's time to assemble our pillowcase. We've pulled everything out, we've pressed all of our seams, but we've got to get rid of that selvage edge. We have to cut it off. Now, as you can see on this particular piece, this is the one that's in the furthest right here. We want to make sure that that is where our cut goes, at least here, maybe a teeny bit on that side of it. The rest will be good to go. It's not going to change the width of your pillowcase that much. Your pillow will still easily fit in there, even cutting that much off. So we're going to fold the piece together into quarters, and it shows you on figure 12 how to fold it in quarters. All you're going to do is you're going to do wrong sides together. Your right side is going to be out. We're going to match the two corners here. So we've got these edges matched. Then we're going to just fold it together this way in fourths, and then just neaten it up. So I have folded it in fourths. I'm lining everything up straight. I'm going to flip it around here just to make sure that I have all of my edges lined up so that when I make my cut, I have a nice straight cut. We're going to line that bottom fold along one of the lines on the cutting mat. Then I'm going to take my ruler, and remember there's that selvage that we want to make sure we get rid of. So I've lined my ruler up on a cutting mat line, and then I want to make sure that it's over far enough that we cut off that edge. Okay, then we're just going to cut. Okay, now you're going to leave this folded with the right side out. That's really important because that's how we make a French seam. So what we're going to do is we're going to pin along this edge first. And you're just going to, it's just easiest because it's folded, it's in line. We're just going to go ahead and pin that. I'm going to make sure, of course, that everything is lined up. And then we're going to do the same thing along this edge. Now this edge is a little trickier because we have this that we want to make sure these are matched up so that it looks good. So I'll show you what I mean by that. This is the folded edge. So this is nice around the edge. It's totally folded. But this edge is where we have to match those seams. And we want them to look nice. We want them to match as best as we can. So what we're going to do is we're going to poke the pin through the seam here, about 1/4 of an inch, and then the same thing through the seam on this side. That is what's going to line up those two pieces. You want to make sure that this is nice and perpendicular, straight up and down. Then we are going to diagonally pin right across that seam. So we'll pin this way, and we'll pin this way, and take that pin out. That's going to keep that pretty close to being exact. It might be off a little bit. You've got a lot of layers there. So we just want it so it's not really super obvious that it's off. Then we're going to go ahead and pin all the way down this edge, just like we did across the bottom edge. And we are going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. You want to be really careful that you sew that accurately. When I say that, I mean we don't want to get it any less than 1/4 inch, because we're going to be trimming that seam back to about 1/8 inch, and we want to make sure that we have everything aligned. So go to your sewing machine, you're going to sew along the bottom edge 1/4 inch, and then sew along the side 1/4 inch. So I have sewn along one side and across the bottom. Now what we're going to do is we need to trim this seam to 1/8 inch. And you're probably thinking, why didn't we just sew 1/8 inch? That would be easier. And it probably would if you're really good at measuring that 1/8 inch. You just don't want to get it too tight. And it seems to be easier once we have sewn 1/4 inch. We just want to take a tad off. That's all we're doing. Just enough that when we sew our next seams, everything gets caught inside, and that's why we're doing that. We just want to make sure that we didn't cut into our stitching line. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to this side as well. And it's just, you know, you don't have to be super accurate when it comes to 1/8 inch. Like I say, we're just cutting a tad off. And that's especially important when we get up here to the cuff, because that's where we really don't want that to show. So again, just a tad. Okay, so now what we're going to do, you're thinking, no, my seam is on the outside. Yes, it's supposed to be because we're doing French seams. So now is the time that we turn wrong side out. And when you do that, you want to make sure that you have a point turner, possibly a chopstick, knitting needle, something like that with a blunt end, that you can poke out those corners, because we're going to do our final seam here, and we want to make sure that our corners are nice and square. So that's all we're doing here. We want to also see how sometimes the seams kind of roll into each other, but it doesn't take much as you're pressing to just pull those out and make sure that you have pressed them. You can go inside with your point turner and just go ahead and do this, and it just helps to get those seams out so that when you do press them, you don't have them rolled inside. So I just go along the edge and I just pull them out as best as I can, and then I'm going to take it over to the ironing board and I'm going to press it. It's just a little start. You don't have to do this. You can just try and finagle it, but look at this, you can see, look at how nicely that matches up, and that's because we did that diagonal pinning. It's a little tight right there, so we'll be careful on the ironing board. So go ahead and press those two seams just so that we can then sew our French seam. We have now pressed this so that we have those nice smooth corners. We have our seam, there's no puckers or tucks in there. It's all pressed nicely. Now we are going to finish up our French seam, which is going to be a 3/8 inch seam along the bottom edge and along the other seamed edge. Now I'm going to put a few pins in, not a lot, because I don't want it to start shifting. And if I have the pins in there, I find that that keeps it straight. So I'm just going to go along the edge, put a few pins in, take them out as I sew that 3/8 inch. Now you know, since we did trim our seam back to 1/8 inch, if we're doing an accurate 3/8 inch, it is not going to show. So that seam allowance is hidden in there. That's what a French seam is. We have hidden all of our seam allowances, and especially with a pillowcase, it's kind of nice to have all of those edges just hidden so that when we wash it or when we use it, we don't have any fraying, we don't have any issues with that. So again, I'm just going to put a few pins in. When I sew, I'm going to start with my cuff, and I'm going to actually start in a little bit, back stitch, and then start going. That way I don't have little threads left at the end. So if I start in about an inch and back stitch and then start going, I'll have a nice finished edge there. I'm going to go down this side and across the bottom, turn it right side out, press it, and we're going to have our pillowcase. Okay, I'm finished. I did do that back tack here. I also, it's up to you, your preference, whether you sew off the edge and I do a back stitch, start again with a back stitch, or you can just pivot, whatever works for you, and then I did a back stitch at this end. So let's turn it right side out. And we're going to make sure that we use our point turner just to get those nice corners. And look at that, nice. We can do the same thing here. Just make sure that we've poked those so that they're relatively square. Now we got a lot of bulk in there, so we're just going to do the best that we can. And then at the top, I'm going to make sure everything looks good here. And that looks great. We are going to press this like we did before. Make sure that you've worked those seams out all the way down, just so that you don't have it curled in. And then we're just going to press that. And there it is. I have a completed pillowcase. I love these fabrics. Once again, this is the Sweetheart Collection by My Mind's Eye for Riley Blake Designs. There are several fabrics in this collection, not just these that I showed you. You want to check those out and see what works for you. When it's time to gift it, I like to fold it nicely. I'm going to fold it in thirds and then fold it in thirds. And there you have it, your very own pillowcase. Quick, easy, and perfect for any occasion. I hope you enjoyed following along and you feel inspired to make your own pillowcase using your favorite fabrics. Don't forget to download the free pattern if you haven't already, and be sure to click like on this tutorial. Please subscribe to our channel for more quilting tips and tutorials. Thank you for joining me today, and as always, I'm always trying to be joyful, but I will always be merry.